How did one of the most spectacular paintings by the Italian Renaissance artist Raphael end up in Dresden in the east of Germany? Raphael painted it around 1513, and for some 240 years the work hung on the high altar of the church of San Sisto in Piacenza, a city south of Milan. But in 1752, the monks of this monastery church needed to raise money, and they decided to put the Madonna up for sale. Augustus III was a very interested buyer. He was the King of Poland, the Grand Duke of Lithuania, and the Elector of Saxony, of which Dresden was the capital. The negotiations for Raphael's Madonna took 2 years, and once they agreed on the terms, the painting made the dangerous journey over the Alps to arrive in Dresden on the 1st of March 1754. The Sistine Madonna was commissioned in 1512 by Pope Julius II for the Church of San Sisto in Piacenza, and that is where it has its current name from. Sisto has become Sistine, and so it has nothing to do with the famous Sistine Chapel in Rome. The painting shows the Virgin Mary holding baby Jesus in her arms. It's a heavenly scene, and Raphael made sure that everything in this painting is captured in the heavenly light, as there was no place for darkness in heaven. The result of this heavenly light is that there is almost no shadow to be seen, only a bit on the clouds. The Madonna and Child are flanked by 2 saints, which we know because of their halos. As I have done in quite some videos on this channel, it is quite interesting to study the 2 saints to see if there are any attributes that can help us identify them. This is usually tricky, but doable with some careful study. But in this case, it's not that easy, as there are only few obvious attributes. For the female saint, we can see that she wears a somewhat colorful outfit. She looks like a pretty lady, and just above her shoulder is part of a tower. This helps us to identify her as Saint Barbara. Legend tells us that Barbara was a beautiful woman who was locked up in a tower by her father and eventually beheaded by her father for having converted to Christianity. So the tower is her standout attribute, and her identity is confirmed by her being a patron saint of the church in Piacenza for which this painting was intended. Identifying the male saint is trickier. One noticeable attribute, though, is the papal crown or tiara at the bottom left, telling us that this man must have been a pope. We can see an acorn on top of the crown, but all I know is that the acorn was associated with Pope Julius II, who commissioned this painting. The clue to his identity must be in the cape he is wearing, but it's hard for me to see exactly what the patterns on it represent. Some experts have identified some oak leaves, again related to the commissioning pope. But considering the other patron saint of the church for which this work was commissioned, this man has been identified as Pope Sixtus II, who was the 24th pope and only was in charge for 1 year, in the year 257, as he was murdered the next year. He has barely been depicted in art history, and no clear attributes are associated with him, other than that he was a pope and was martyred. My guess is that Raphael tried to tell some of his story on his cape, but I can't identify any specifics there. But surely let me know in the comment section if you do see another clue. The 2 angels at the bottom are perhaps the most intriguing part of this painting, and there are many reproductions in which they have just been shown in isolation. Notice how these angels are leaning on a ledge. And have you noticed the curtain at the top and sides? The curtain, by the way, is attached with rings to a somewhat shabby pole, and that was perhaps the reason that for a while when the painting was exhibited in Dresden, the top few centimeters of the painting had been folded around to the back, hiding this pole. But a restoration in 1827 discovered that the painting was folded on the top and it was restored to its original state. The idea of the ledge and the curtain is that the Virgin Mary, Jesus, the saints and the angels seem to be in a different heavenly space, and we are just looking in on them from the outside. Anyway, back to the angels. There has been evidence that they have been added later on to this painting. For a while it was thought that another artist must have done this, but more recent research has not excluded the possibility that they were a later addition by Raphael himself. The chubby angels look like they're bored and have little attention for this heavenly scene, and this is definitely the popular interpretation. However, a more pious explanation could be that one of the angels put the finger in front of its mouth as a sign for us to be quiet, as a sign of respect for the scene above them. And I guess you have noticed how they are not the only two small angels in this painting, as the background is filled with little angel heads visible through the clouds. It confirms the heavenly atmosphere of the painting, where the Virgin and Child are surrounded by numerous angels. The family of King Augustus III was wealthy, and by buying this kind of prestigious artwork, along with thousands of others that they bought in those years, they wanted to raise their international status and compete with the courts in France and Austria. And a large painting by Raphael would definitely help a bit. It was not that they really liked the painting in itself though, as they did not hang it in a spot of any prominence, and it was also not important enough to be among the many engravings in the 1757 catalogue of their collection. By comparison, the work that was most popular in their collection was this nativity scene from around 1530 by Correggio. If you put the work side by side, you can see that Correggio's work appears much more dynamic and dramatic than Raphael's Madonna. However, the opinions about these paintings would soon change. The grandeur and simplicity of Raphael's work would find its supporters. In the second half of the 18th century, a new art style would become popular in Germany known as Neoclassicism, which was developed by artists like Anton Raphael Mengs, from whose hand you can see some works here. And as you can imagine, the clarity and classical details of these works by Mengs fit much better with the clarity of Raphael's work than that of Correggio. And from then on, the fame of the Sistine Madonna has only increased further. One thing we did not look at yet are the expressions of Jesus and Mary. Instead of lovingly looking at her baby as in many other Madonna paintings, Mary looks pretty serious, and the large eyes of Jesus and the pulled down corners of his mouth suggest that he is scared of something. The most convincing explanation for this that I read about is that they are looking at the future of Jesus, especially his crucifixion. And while not known with certainty, it could be that opposite of the altar where this piece originally hung, there may have been a painting of the crucifixion. But for now, that remains speculation. Anyway, this gets us to the end of this discussion of a unique masterpiece. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to check out other ones on this channel or share it with any friends or family. Thanks for watching.